Did you know that not all composites are created equal?
What?
We're talking about that today. Welcome back to the Ultimate Deck Podcast with your favorite people on this podcast. Shane,
Out of all the people on this podcast.
and Justin, we're probably top two for sure.
Absolutely.
Shane Chapman, Justin McCrae here with you today. We are going to tackle the question of what's the difference between all these composites? Why is one $1 and why is one $28?
Let's find out.
It's not that big of a gap, but there's a lot of questions and a lot of contractors are well versed in this. They know exactly why one's $2 and why one's $6. But to the average Joe that you're helping to try to build a deck for, they're questioning you why your price is higher because you're using Trex or TimberTech, and they've got a quote from some guy going to get some box store stuff, and it's half the price.
It's half the material.
Why? Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons. So today we're just going to break this down. We've kind of come up with a few different categories and how these products are different, and we're going to go through them one by one because I find that that's the easiest way to talk about something, is to progress through the motions in a logical and chronological order.
Sounds
Not chronological. Anyway.
Sounds super efficient.
Yeah. So composite or composite for our American friends is just a generic term that can be used for anything.
That's not made up of one particular ingredient.
Just a few different ingredients makes up something. We've got composite hockey sticks. We've got composite other things. And then we have composite deck boards. So when it comes to composite deck boards, though, traditionally, like when composites first came out, they were named as such because they were a mixture of plastic and wood. That was the two ingredients.
Pretty much, yeah.
Just like recycled plastic and wood fibers.
And some resins and whatnot.
Whatever. They just mixed some crap together and pushed a board out of a hole and... well, there it is. Much like giving birth. From what I've heard.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, very similar.
I know when I've been to the plants and looked at it, I'd be like, oh.
That reminds me of my wife
I've
giving
been here
birth to
before.
my children. Mm-hmm.
So that's traditionally how things are done. Mix it in a batch of cookie batter, extrude it out of a mold, and that was your composite deck board.
And voila.
And then composite deck boards entered generation 2. They had some brands had some issues. It was like with all that exposed wood fiber and whatnot, they were having some bleaching issues, some fading issues, some staining issues, some mold
Flaking,
issues, all sorts of things were happening because of mostly due to the fact that wood was exposed in the composite deck board. So then cement, and I've been called out on this before. I said it was Fibron. Apparently it was actually Duralife. Somebody, some innovative manufacturer of decking thought, hey, if we put a protective layer around this board, then the wood's not exposed anymore. And then
all of our problems will be solved.
Yeah, we'll put some UV inhibitors in this thing so it doesn't fade and whatnot, and then we'll have a better product. And so that's what happened. So the first category we're talking about is traditional composites versus a cap stock or a capped composite, you might hear them called. Mm-hmm. And so that's the difference between those two. For the homeowners, they're not familiar with this. They get sold traditional composites
all the time. Yeah.
And they're none the wiser because it's not they're not supposed to be the expert in this stuff. As far as they know, they're getting a composite, and unfortunately,
the zero maintenance aspect, that's the selling point, right?
They think composite and they think, yeah, that's zero maintenance or low maintenance. And it's like, sort of, but if you don't educate them that a traditional composite is going to fade and stain and you might have some mildew or mold growth on it,
right,
then like you've kind of duped them. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty of products out there nowadays that are capped that resist these issues, and they're, for the most part, lower cost than the traditional stuff.
That's what I mean. I'm not sure that it's even competition anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
but it is. There's still so many guys that I don't get on selling this traditional stuff. Like, come on, you guys. And the reason is always like, well, I like that I can router the edges and the colors all the way through the board. What does it matter if the colors all the way through if the color's gone in 3 weeks anyway?
Is never going to see why would they ever be concerned that the inside of the board is the same color as the cap or non-cap? Yeah, I don't understand.
The reason they always say it's like, well, what if you drop something and
chip it,
tear that doesn't even happen.
Right.
Like, how often does that actually happen? That's a pretty big rarity.
So the idea is so that if it does scratch or if it gets chipped, that the scratch won't be super noticeable. Is that the idea behind it? Because it's the same color, but it.
Sure.
But if it fades and you scratch it, isn't the color underneath going to be different anyway?
Yes. So like every industry has gone this way. So the whole reason, like the color's all the way through the board, it's fine. We don't use solid stock lumber for kitchen cabinet boxes.
Right.
It's got a veneer on it. Everything has a veneer on it.
Yeah. But I guess I don't understand why some of these manufacturers are still, as much as decking has evolved over the last several years, why are these why are these manufacturers still doing it the traditional way? Is it to keep costs down?
I don't know, like, because the ones that are out there, they never had some of the warranty issues that some other brands did. So they it's still a good board, I guess. And if the cost was much different, I could then there's a reason for it.
Right.
If the non-capped composites were in a lower price category than all the cap stuff, then I'd say, oh, okay, well, if you're looking for a really big budget board that's structurally going to be good for a long time, then fine. Mm-hmm. But they're not cheaper anymore. There's lots of options that are better and cheaper than a traditional capped composite. So
yeah,
I don't know why you do it anymore, but that's the differences. So if you're a homeowner listening to this and you're about to hire a contractor, ask this question: are you selling me a composite deck board, traditional one that's going to fade and stain, or are you selling me a capped composite or a cap stock? Because trust me, you want the cap stock.
And a lot of times, I can't speak for every brand, but the majority of brands that I have experience with, they offer at least they're offering years of fade and stain guarantees on these things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean that alone should be the tipping point for a consumer.
Yes. 100%. I don't know. Anyway, so just ask that question and know what you're getting, because title of this episode, not all composites are created equal.
There we go.
There's two different categories. Yeah. And so if the reason my contractor gave me is well, why did you give me the one that faded and stained? It's well, it's because I like working with that one better. I like that I can route the edges. They care. They want the good quality product as a finish at the end. They don't care what it takes for you to install it. And it's not like the cap stuff is hard to install. It's it's the same.
It's the very same principle.
So anyways, do these things for your customer, not for yourself.
Right.
I guess is the moral of that story. So anyway, let's get past that. And just to reference, we're not talking about PVCs today, but there's also PVC products out there, right? That are also another category. And we're trying to talk about just composites. PVCs don't have any of that wood in it to begin with. They're just a straight plastic decking. But if you're looking at a brand, if you're looking at one of the big brands, Trex does not make a non-capped composite anymore. It's all capped. Fibron does not make a non-capped composite. It's all capped. TimberTech makes a line of Reliaboard / Docksider that still isn't capped, but it's a very small portion of their business. They've got a cajillion colors that are capped.
That's right.
So shop with those. Just so people are aware, the ones that you're going to run into that are not capped that I'm aware they're still in market are the Moisture Shield Vantage line is still big where we are.
Right.
It's not capped. Latitudes is not capped. I just mentioned TimberTech's Docksider / Reliaboard lines aren't capped. So if you see those show up, it's not that they're bad boards. It's just that they're the BlackBerry to today's Samsung.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. I had to really think about that. It's been a while since I heard that.
I wanted to say Apple, but
oh, come on.
It's just what gone the way of the BlackBerry.
Yeah. Shots fired.
Anyway, the next one we're going to talk about, next category is the profiles.
Right.
And so within these composite deck boards, we've got different profiles. And when I say that, people probably right away think solid edge, solid board, solid edge versus a groove board. Right. Sure. That's a couple different profiles, but what I'm talking about more is the actual whole, profile of the board inside and out. And so what I'm talking about is if you go to a Trex Transcend or a, Decorator's Voyage or everybody's mid to high end boards are a solid profile. So they're 1 inch thick or 7/8 thick, however thick they are, but they're that thickness throughout the entire board.
Right.
Then you've got some scalloped profiles. And what scallop means is basically it looks like they've taken a giant comb and drug it through the back of the board to remove some of the material out, but not a fine tooth comb.
Just
we're talking like
a hair pick type,
like a hair pick, like a really wide combed hair pick. And so in some brands' cases, like with Trex's Enhanced line, there's quite a few scallops. I believe there's 6 fingers, 5 scallops out of the board. With TimberTech, there's 2 scallops and 3 fingers out of, and same with Fibron. So those are kind of the big ones. That's the way that the good brands are able to give you a low cost board, is by removing some of the material out of that. And it kind of works like a floor system in a way where you've got like stronger kind of, boy, I'm going to butcher this. Stronger kind of like you've got your ribs, right? That provide the structure. And then you've got and some of the board is full thickness all the way through. So the ribs give it its strength. So you're still getting a strong board that way. The other profile you see out there though, is what we would call like a hollow core.
Hollow core. Mm-hmm.
And I've got a lot less confidence in these ones.
I don't know how you fasten these things down.
Some of them you don't.
You can't obviously they have a grooved and a solid edge profile, but if you have to ever have to face screw one of those suckers.
Yeah. So the common ones we see out there, this is a Chinese brand thing. I don't see this much. There's a couple brands that I'm aware of in like American made ones that do this as well. But most of the time you're seeing this from some of the Chinese brands, but they've either got holes, like holes, literally
big, like square holes
bored through them, like circle holes, or sometimes completely hollow with like little ribs in the middle of the board. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a skeleton of a board. It's like there's hardly any material in the core of the board at all. There's just little ribs that kind of provide structure. I don't know how I feel about that. I've seen a lot of failures from that profile where between the ribs, the board starts to crack along the rib or starts to sag between the ribs. Like it's just not a profile that gives me a lot of confidence.
There's between the ribs, there's hardly any material there.
Well, that's the thing. When we're talking about the good brands in a scalloped profile, the scallop profile on the thinnest part of the board, there's still, depends on the brand,
it's probably still 3/8 of an inch,
half inch, right? 3/8 of an inch of material left there. There's still some thickness there to it.
Right.
But with the ones we're talking about now with this hollow core, we're talking like the surface of that board is like an eighth of an inch.
Best. Yeah, exactly.
1/8 of an inch thick. So there's nothing left there.
So I don't know I just don't know how structurally it's going to have, that those are going to have any longevity. And maybe they don't. Maybe they're not designed for that. Maybe
and that's why they've got shorter warranties and that's why they're cheap.
Right.
But people need to know, like when you're going to a box store and you see a profile like that, you're not getting the same thing as your contractor is bidding you with Trex.
Exactly. You can't go in there with the idea and be like, holy smokes, we got composite deck boards here for $1.50 a foot. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's $1.50 for a reason.
Yeah.
You're not getting any material.
Exactly. So I'd be wary of those profiles. The hollow core board profiles make me a little bit nervous. I like some of them I'm sure are fine. But we know that a scallop profile is fairly stable and a solid profile you can't go wrong with. Right. Scallop profiles, the only thing you see sometimes they have a little bit of cupping to them. But it's not a major issue. I haven't seen much for like outright failures on a scallop profile. They're pretty reliable.
And even the brands that we, the brands that we carry that do have the scallop profiles, they're still guaranteeing this structure. Like they're still giving like 25-year structural warranty on them.
Yeah, you get the big warranty on them as well. So they're sticking around.
So they're obviously confident in the profile and how they've made it. So
for the most part though, if you look at a board and think that doesn't look very strong, there's probably something to that gut feel.
Yeah.
So be wary of what you're getting as far as that. That's the difference between a $1.50 board. I'm talking Canadian prices again, but a $1.50 board, you're not getting a good profile. You're getting a hollow core.
Exactly.
On that. Yeah. The next one we're talking about is partial wrap versus full wrapped. And maybe we should have moved this to the number 2 thing we talked about because it's related to the first thing we talked about with the capped composites. Right. So we mentioned that there's traditional composites with the wood core is exposed, and then there are capped composites that the wood core is not exposed. It's pure plastic and so on and so forth. But some manufacturers apply that cap only to the top of the board, and some of them go top and sides, and some of them go all the way around. And so opinion time.
Right.
How important is a fully wrapped board to you? Do you think that's an important feature?
I think it depends on the application. So if you're doing a ground level deck, and you're concerned about moisture, obviously where we're from, our winters are pretty harsh and we get a lot of snow, and in the spring when it warms up, there's water that can get under there and it can lay there. So obviously the risk with that, if you have composite material down, there's wood filings in there. So that wicks moisture, and over time it can cause mold and, so on and so forth. So a ground level deck for me, I think I'd be more apt to go with a full wrap because you get that extra layer of protection on the underside.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some scenarios where that fully wrapped board is beneficial. To your point, low ventilation close to the ground. Well, that's good. If the board's going to not be dry all the time with good airflow, then probably good that you protect the back as well. on a dock where there's water kind of splashing up on the bottom of the board all the time, sure, that's probably a good place where you want to cap. And aesthetically, if you're going to do like a privacy wall or something where the back of the board is going to be visible, then obviously it's nice if it's got a cleaner finish too. But capped all the way around doesn't mean finished, like doesn't mean the back of the board looks the same as the top of the board. Like,
that's a select few.
Yeah, TimberTech's case, it's capped all the way around, but the back of the board's brown, not whatever color you have on the front of your board. So it looks better than just raw, but it's not.
I guess, yeah. Like if you were doing a walkout and you weren't going to soften in the underside, if you're going to leave it exposed, you could look up and see a somewhat of a finished edge on the underside, right?
Sure, yeah.
But I think, yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that if you're doing like the majority of decks that are going to be at least 24 inches or higher off the ground, I don't know if a wrap is all the way around is really that crucial.
So for the big brands that people are going to be seeing in a store that you're more familiar with, Trex doesn't wrap any of their boards on the backside. Their entire lineup is not wrapped on the backside. It is wrapped on the top, and halfway down, like into the groove of the board is wrapped. And on the solid edge ones are wrapped on the full sides, but the bottom is never wrapped on any Trex board ever. With Fibron, their lineup changes. The Good Life and Sanctuary lines are wrapped 3 sides, so top and the sides. And the Protect Advantage line as well. And then when you get up to the Horizon and Symmetry lines, it's a full wrap. And not only is it a full wrap, it's finished all sides. So the back of the board looks the same as the top of the board. So you can actually flip them. If you've got a scratch or a mark on it or something, you can flip the board. So there's efficiency for install as well if it's wrapped all sides and finished all sides.
Right. Yeah, with Fibron, but correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks as though they cap their boards, they wrap their boards, and then for the grooved ones, that's when they groove them, because the actual groove on the Fibron boards is not capped, it's not wrapped in there. So you're essentially is the wrap on 3 sides on the Fibron boards, is that strictly cosmetic?
Kind of like, and so what you're referring to is that TimberTech, for example, it extrudes the board with the groove in it.
Exactly.
So therefore the polyethylene cap is inside of the groove as well. It grooves it everywhere. Whereas Fibron extrudes the board and then cuts a groove into it with the saw blade afterwards.
Right.
And so technically the groove isn't protected on a Fibron board. And TimberTech's line, they are capped all sides on all of their lines except for the brand new Edge line that they released this year is not capped on the back side.
Right.
Capped on the front, the tops and sides, but not on the back. So that's what to look for. Does that matter to you? In most instances, probably not. The backside of the board doesn't need protection from the sun because it's never going to see it.
Exactly.
As long as it gets airflow, it doesn't need to be protected from water. If it's staying dry, it's probably not going to have mold growth. And even if it does, it's on the bottom of the board. So as long as it's not like eating away, then it's not an issue. So in some circumstances, a fully wrapped board does have some benefits for sure. It's never a bad thing. Let's just put it that way. Fully wrapped is not ever a bad thing.
But I don't think consumers or contractors that are selling customers, I don't think it has to be a make or break thing. Again, unless it's like a very unique situation where it's a dock or it's like a ground level deck where there's a history of water pooling there, like pretty much all year round. There's poor ventilation, but otherwise, I mean, anything is fair game.
Yep. So now you know on that one. Partial wraps versus full wraps. The other category we have on here is the type of filler that's used. So we mentioned that every composite deck board has a filler because that's why it's called a composite and not something else. But there's different types of filler. And I don't know that there's a right or wrong in this. This isn't a good or bad, but well, that's not entirely true. There's some benefits to some of them. So the types of wood that they're using, or not wood at all, differs. So everybody's got their own formulation. You know, certain companies only use,
hardwoods,
maple or hardwood sawdust, wood fibers as their filler. They only use that because they found that, the tannins don't discolor as much with certain types of wood, or it's just got more strength in it or whatever. So everybody's got their own formula. All the big brands use wood. Like your Trex, your TimberTech, your Fibron, they all use wood. Just what types of wood, it differs a little bit. There's other brands out there like Decorators that don't use wood at all. They use mineral dust. So it's an inorganic filler that's not going to, attract mold or anything. It's a little bit more confidence that nothing can ever really go wrong with that.
Right.
Then you've got other ones that use like bamboo as a filler or rice hulls or,
I just assumed it was pretty much whatever. It was pretty much whatever the manufacturers could get their hands on for filler. Because remember, this would be more for the plastics or the recycled laundry jugs or whatever it is.
Yep.
Remember, there was a batch of Fibron that we brought in the underside of the board. was like a traditional composite color, like kind of that tan blacky type thing. And then there was another batch that came in. Remember, it was like super green.
That was Fibron. It was a Good Life board.
Yeah.
It was like super green. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
clearly
that.
got a lot of one brand of jugs or something.
Yeah, exactly.
On that
Yeah.
one. It's strange. But
Yeah.
but anyways, yeah, as far as the filler goes, it can be a wide variety of things there. It's there to add strength and as a cost cutting measure instead of using all plastic.
Right.
So everybody's got their own formulation, uses different types of filler.
I'd say really the only difference would be on the decorators, like the mineral dust. That would be the only.
Yeah, I think if there was an argument to be made, probably inorganic is better than organic because if something that can't break down is better than something that can, I suppose. But
Right.
don't let that shy you away from ones that use wood as a filler. They're great as well.
Yeah,
And the cap stock is meant as a way of protecting that, so it's kind of a non-issue.
exactly.
The final thing we're talking about is the cap quality. So we're talking about like the durability, kind of the type of capping it is, the traction it might give you. And so for the most part across the industry, you're using like with a composite deck boards, it's typically just polyethylene plastic. So
Right.
there may be some out there that use a different formulation or different type of plastic, but that's kind of the big three are using a polyethylene. The durability, some are better than others.
Yep.
Like Trex's Transcend line is pretty rock solid for scratching.
But
But
it's cap thickness though too, right?
cap thickness and the embossing on it too.
Right.
So some of them have an embossing, like I'll call out TimberTech's Terrain line has an embossing to it that's very kind of like hairline and it kind of stands up. So it's more prone to getting knocked down, which shows itself as a scratch.
Exactly.
So, but it's not harming the board. It's not damaging the board. It's just that the
Reminds me of those holographic rulers or hockey cards.
I was going to go with sequins.
Oh,
You ever seen like a
of course you would.
a pillow that has all sequins, and if you brush your hand along it one way, they all change color? You know that? That's like anyway.
I think my example's better. You know, remember those little rulers, and you could like take your thumb and you could like knock things all down.
yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
So regardless, all that's happening is that you're laying down the tall embossing a little bit, and it shows itself as a scratch. But some stuff that's more smooth that doesn't happen with. You're not going to scratch it by knocking down
Right.
something. But then you've got the issue. It's like, oh, if your cap's super smooth, maybe you can't knock down the embossing, but it's slippery.
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
there's no
traction.
There isn't any traction to it. So like,
Right.
you know, Fibron's high-end boards in their Horizon or even their Protected Vantage line is a very smooth embossing. So it's like
slippery.
you're not going to knock it down because there's nothing to knock down, but it's more slippery as a result of that. So,
Right.
you know, capped composites are never great for traction
in comparison to
some other products.
Yeah.
And then there's what Decorators does is they've given it, I don't know what the hell they've done to this stuff, but it's like they've done some sort of embossing to it that gives it ridiculous traction, easily the best traction of any capped composite board that I've walked on.
Absolutely. Yep.
Comparable, if not better, to a lot of the PVCs that have great traction.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different, you know, not every board's the same as far as traction goes. So there's that, right?
Yep.
Some are much better. Some are very slippery. Like I would say that Fibron's high-end boards very slippery. Decorators very not. Like it's
So
opposite
price
end of the spectrum.
price point doesn't always reflect that, because obviously you know what I mean.
No,
like
not at all.
high-end Fibron boards, or you might as well go for skate.
Yeah, and some of the like Fibron's Good Life line I find is less slippery than their high-end line. So it's definitely not dictated around price.
Right.
And I don't know that traction is one thing that you would say is better on a US made good brand versus a Chinese brand. I don't know that. I've never walked on the Chinese brands. I keep as far away from them as I can. But that's
Conversation for another day.
the story.
Yep.
And then that's the last thing I would call to here is that generally you've got kind of your American made, or I'll say North American made because there's the odd Canadian one as well that's good, versus your stuff that's getting shipped in from China. The stuff coming from China, there's some good stuff out there for sure. But you're hit and miss with the brands, right? You're generally the stuff coming from China is coming as a price play, not so much as a quality play. Mm-hmm. Like the North American manufacturers can make an excellent deck board. The ones coming from China that are being imported because they're cheap.
Right.
And they're cheap because they lack something. Mm-hmm. Like some of those boards that you can peel that cap off with your fingernail, scratch with your fingernail. We just had a contractor that came in the other day. He's like, I'm building this deck. I show up. They already had the materials. So sorry, I didn't get it from you guys, but they bought a bunch of stuff from, I believe it was Lowe's or Rona, I think actually.
Rona.
And he's like, I walked into the garage and they had it all sitting there. It's like, this is what we're using. He's like, I'm
not putting that down.
I don't think you should do that. Well, why? It was a good price. Yeah, it's a good price until everything's a good price until it's
until it's
not a good price anymore because
Exactly.
you have to replace it or it looks like crap. And they're like, why? And he walked over with his fingernail and took a few little scratches on it. And like, he had stuff under his fingernail and like, it was a visible marking on there. And she's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. So now imagine you've walked on that for a summer and your
Right.
dog goes out in the yard and rips around on that. Like, this is going to look absolutely terrible within months.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to save a couple bucks, fine, but you're buying yourself a headache
Yeah.
on that cheap stuff. Get yourself a good brand. Get something with a good warranty. If they're not standing behind the warranty for at least 25 years, like all the big brands, you should ask questions.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're not standing behind it. And let's say you had trouble with a board that was being imported ship from China and you had a warranty problem. Who are you calling?
Exactly. Who's gonna take care of the warranty for you?
So I'm like,
Because most box stores are like, no, you got to get in touch with the company directly.
well, and from what I've heard, most of those companies leave the box store leave the store on the hook. It's like, it's your problem now. You bought this, you cover it. And some of these ones that are like franchised box stores, like smaller, like small Ronas that are independently owned,
Right.
like they get stuck
Yeah.
with this stuff because like you replace it. It's like, I've got 40% return rates on these boards, warranty claims, and I have to pay that out of my pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
No good.
So moral of the story is there is multiple levels of qualities of composite. A lot of this stuff can be dictated by price. Of course, there's different nuances, but generally, if you're spending more on a board, it's because you're getting a better board. No brand out there is more expensive because they've just decided they're going to take down 3 times more margin than anybody else. It's because the board costs more.
Yep.
And because they're doing things better than a board that's cost less. Like that's
Right.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Most
I
of
think
the time.
if for people that are thinking about going composite and they're like, oh wow, we can get a composite deck for $1.50 a foot or whatever it is. Like just if you're tight on budget, just wait until you can afford like a decently priced composite board.
Or spend the extra. It's not that much of a gap to go to a Trex Enhanced or a Fiberon Good
No.
Life or a TimberTech Edge board.
It's not
Like
at all.
spend the extra 50 cents a foot and go to one that's good.
Exactly.
Stop encouraging these box stores for bringing in all this crap.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
it frustrates me when I walk, take my dog for a walk and I see somebody who's got a pile of some crap board sitting in their driveway. And part of me is like, man, almost feel like I should warn them that they're
Right.
making a bad decision. And then the other half of me thinks like, well, they kind of deserve it because they went to a box store. They didn't decide to go to a local lumberyard or somewhere that actually knows what they're doing. They've
Right.
just gone and shopped solely on price. So they've done this to themselves a little bit. But anyways, you get what you pay for. We've had numerous customers that come in that have bought that stuff and end up at
Taking it
our store
back. Yep.
to get better product. So now you've
Yep.
paid twice.
Yeah, exactly.
Rant over.
For now.
For now. Do you have anything else to add to that? Like, moral of the story is you get what you pay for with this stuff 9 times out of 10.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a good way to end it.
And certainly if you guys have any questions about this, again, most contractors are somewhat familiar with all these issues we talked about. They can educate you.
Yep.
But if you have any questions about a certain brand or certain style, whatever, shoot us a message.
Absolutely.
Catch us on Instagram at The Ultimate Deck Shop. We will answer them to the best of our abilities. Until next week, friends. Peace.
See you later.